himself. Thus, among daily, weekly, and annual rituals associated with its worship, the Dalada Perahera conducted in the month of Esala is considered the foremost amongst all such processions in the nation. According to the details present in the Mahaparinibbana Sutra of the Digha Nikaya, among the relics of the Buddha there were 4 tooth relics. A tooth from the lower left jaw was washed over by the truth that the Tathagata spake over 45 years and came into the possession of the people of the Tunsinghale as an auspicious piece of samsaric good fortune. Due to the threatening conditions that occurred in the Kalinga nation during the reign of King Muttasiva, Princess Hemamala and her consort Prince Danta brought this sacred tooth relic to our nation during the reign of King Kitsirimevan. Subsequent to this happy event, which occurred in AD 328, the relic was placed in the Isuramunya Vihara, and King Kitsirimevan commenced the worship of the sacred tooth with the Dalada Perahera. The procession was of such pageantry and such beauty that King Kitsirimevan conducted the Perahera every year during the time of the Anuradhapura kingdom to invoke blessings on the people, bring rain, and to give us a bountiful harvest. It was in this way that the background was laid for the annual celebration of which the sacred tooth relic was taken in procession along the streets for the devotion and worship of the people of the country. Therefore, regardless of how a king ascended the throne or how his coronation took place, if he did not have the blessings of the sacred tooth relic and the rains and fertility that it promised, he was subject to the censure of the people and not considered by them to be a sovereign king. The successive kings of Anuradhapura, Polonnaruwa, Dampadeniya, Yapahua, Kurunegala, Gampola, Kotte, Sitawaka, and the Kandian kingdoms conducted the Dalada Perahera according to the great traditions of its worship that had been established before them. During the Senkadagala kingdom, King Vimaladharma Surya, despite being crowned king, was not considered a true king of the Helak people since he did not have the blessing of the sacred Dalada tooth relic. Therefore, great efforts were made to bring the sacred relic to the Senkadagala kingdom. Then, the relic, which was in the custody of Bhikkhu Ratanalankara of Devanagala at the Sabaragamuwa Dalgamuwa Mahavihara, was brought through the Uva province in secret and on the first day was placed in the Gedige Vihara. Historians knowledgeable of the matter say that on that day, the Dalada Vahanse was brought into the courtyard of the king and a special building constructed to house the sacred relic. The Kanda Udarata Sri Dalada Mandira came into being in this way. Up until the year 1815, when the Hela kingdom passed into the control of British colonists, the Dalada Perahera was conducted with royal honor and devotion each year in the month of Esala. During the period of the colonists, in the absence of the Hela king, the Diyavadana Nilame was tasked with conducting the annual Perahera according to the ancient traditions, and space was provided for this. The Dalada Perahera traditions and those of the associated Devalis rose from the devotion of the Buddha and great compassion for the people and were founded on the highest of human qualities. The Senkadagala Dalada Perahera is the only such ceremonious procession in the world where the streets are lit up by the collective devotion of the gods, human beings, and elephants to the living Buddha. Thus, the Maharandoli or the Grand Randoli Perahera is honored for its pageantry by the great devotion of our people, and this is an earnest request on our part to you to be a part of this with your hearts and with your minds.
Welcome you all to the special live broadcast of the great Randoli Perahera, brought to you by the Media Bureau of Sri Dalada Perahera. On this beautiful moonlit night, with the Senkadagala kingdom decorated with thousands of light, you are now seeing the Perahera officials obtaining permission and blessings from the Diyavadnilame, who is the lay custodian of the sacred tooth relic, before commencing their street perambulations. And these are the 10 Vidanes of the villages under the Senkadakala kingdom, attired in their official costumes.
And now, this is the handing over of case by the Devadannilame to the officiating bhikkhus, and it is the tradition that on the day of the Grand Randoli Perahera, the chief priest of the Puliyar temple garlands the Devadannilame and places a tilak on his forehead and blesses him.
And now, making his way from the upper level to the lower level of the temple of Tooth Relic, the Devadannilame ceremoniously and reverentially takes the Perahera casket under the protection of the chief incumbent of the Malvatu Mahaviharya, Venerable Tibbatue Sri Medankara Nayaka Thero, to the ceremonial tusker.
The Perahera casket, which contains 32 relics of Lord Buddha, is now placed within the Ranhili gate, mounted on the adorned tusker, who will add color and glamour to the grand Randoli procession today.
And as the Perahera officials offer flowers and garlands to the Perahera casket, marking the beginning of the Grand Randoli Perahera, which is the last night procession of the Kandy Esala Perahera.
This is the devout moment when the great tusker steps majestically down from the Mahavahalkada to the Sandagala in preparation to walk the streets of the city on this final Randoli Perahera day.
And with the hope that the Kandy Esala Perahera will bless the people of this country, the whole world and the whole universe with peace and prosperity, we now see the great tusker step onto the Sandagala.
And this tusker is the renowned tusker Nadungamuye Vijayaraja.
As this tusker prepares to walk the streets of the Senkadagala kingdom, we hear the Hevisi troops play the Bahirava Valnadaya in the background as they too join the street perambulations.
Thus, we are about to witness the commencement of the Grand Randoli Procession, the final Randoli Procession, brought to you live by the Media Bureau of Sri Dalada Maligawa.
And now, walking up front with the sounds of whips piercing through the skies, are the whip crackers, announcing that the Perahera has started.
The duty of the whip master is to clear the way for the holy Perahera casket. Therefore, in single file, these whip crackers, led by Upali Jayaratna, wield their whips to notify the citizens of the impending approach of the Perahera.
In ancient times, these whip crackers symbolized the arrival of the king. However, on this procession, on this final Randoli procession, they symbolize the impending approach of the Dalada casket and the Diyavarnilame, the lay custodian of the sacred tooth relic.
At the same time, Rajiv, the annual Perahera is believed to trigger the monsoon. Therefore, these whip crackers produce a sound which is equivalent to the sound of lightning strikes. The reason for doing this is to pay homage to rain gods, requesting to bless our crops and cultivations with rain.
As we see these whip crackers slash their whips on the ground, this might conjure a certain amount or a certain element of fear in most minds. However, the sight of the Perahera whip masters in fact has the opposite effect. It calms the populace, since they are the ones who clear the way for the living Buddha to walk the streets of the Kandian kingdom.
I hope you remember the times, Rajiv, when the great numbers of people who were lining up in the streets of Kandy used to throw coins into the paths of the whip masters as an offering to ward off evil from their children and smooth their life path.
Indeed, that was a beautiful tradition we witnessed throughout the years. Unfortunately, not this year due to the regulations. However, it really highlights the basis of giving, offering and sharing among the people of our land.
Exactly. Regardless of how rich or poor those people are, they used to offer their coins in great devotion and joy to the entire procession.
Speaking of the whips, they are prepared using dried fiber taken from jute or hemp. And these fiber are woven as a thin rope to a length of about 7 feet and connected to a rope to make handling easier. And as you can see, when these whip wielders slash their whips onto the ground, the ends of these whips come undone. And therefore they constantly have to redo the ends and tie the knots as they move along the procession. And it has to be specially mentioned that the whipmaster's duty is handed down from generation to generation of their clans. And only those who have mastered the art of whip cracking will be taken to the grand Randoli procession.
Just as lightning flashes across the skies, the Perahera too has its flashes of light. Now we see the fireball dancers led by E.D. Tilakaratna.
And this again resembles a phenomenon of nature, which is the offering of fire, inviting the rain gods to water our lands with rain.
Indeed, the sight of lightning as a precursor to the descent of the rain gods is a phenomenon of nature, as you mentioned. Those blinding flashes are in fact a cooling heat in the Kandy Esala Procession. This is the heritage of the traditions of our torch dancers.
As we just witness two events or two groups at the start of this procession, we already witness the close resemblance and the close connection of these activities or these types of art to nature.
And this performance, this whole act of turning off the fireballs is called Pandam Palia in Sinhala.
Indeed, and these oil-soaked rags are tied to an iron wheel with leather thongs. And once those are lit, and the dancers perform their dance by turning the wheels fast and gradually increasing their speed. As mentioned before, this phenomenon or this display is akin to lightning.
The sun, moon, earth, universe, solar month, night and day are all cyclic, and the fire dancers highlight these universal cycles and how they burn and cool us in our life cycles as well.
As we see these young dancers perform acrobatic displays of fire dancing, we all should be mindful of the part that fire plays in cooking, protecting crops and hyenas in the past, and dispelling darkness. These dancers tame the fire and give it as a Dalada offering. And that reminds us that fire is indeed a natural element which is so precious.
As you can see, these fire dancers are completely focused and immersed in their art, keeping their minds and bodies one-pointed as they create their cyclic patterns of fire. This is because the slightest inattention could result in disaster.
Indeed, Sachini, this is a dangerous act of fire play. However, these dancers are so skilled, determined, and they have practiced so hard to take part in this Dalada offering. And further, the splendor of this dance is seen when a large group of them perform simultaneously, merging their fiery elements into an amazing display of light and heat.
And this tradition is handed down from generation to generation, with individuals of all ages, from the very young to the very old, taking part in this display of the kingly heritage of their clans.
We see these fire wielders wield their rings of fire horizontally, vertically, on upper planes, on middle planes, and on lower planes, painting a beautiful picture altogether.
For the children, it's a fire play, and for the experienced elders, it is a devout, committed fire dance.
And in addition to resembling lightning, these fire dancers also serve a few other objectives. They also illuminate the way for the procession. And secondly, they clear the way for the procession to proceed. And they also attract viewers with varied patterns and modes of dancing.
Adding to that, Rajiv, the fiery cycle of samsara flooded with desire, ignorance and anger is also highlighted by the chakras painted by these fireball dancers.
As you can see, these fire wielders perform this very dangerous act. And this shows the devotion, the dedication, and the veneration they have for the Dalada sacred relic.
Coming into our sight now are the Buddhist flag bearers led by the national flag.
And the national flag, as you would witness, symbolizes that although this is primarily a Buddhist festival, it showers blessings, praise, peace and prosperity to the whole island nation, Sri Lanka.
The Buddhist flag is a symbol of faith and peace. 6 colors of the flag represent the colors of the aura that emanated from the body of Lord Buddha when he attained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. The horizontal strips represent the races of the world living in harmony, while the vertical strips represent eternal world peace.
Diving deeper into the vertical and horizontal strips. Blue symbolizes universal compassion. Yellow is for middle path. Red is for blessings. And white, of course, is for purity and liberation. And finally, orange is for unshakable wisdom. And all these colors together are resembled in the final stripe, which means and symbolizes the combination of all the virtues into a single being.
These flag bearers, who are the representatives from Sri Chandrananda Buddhist College, Kandy, create a sense of the unlimited compassion of the Buddha through the sacred Dalada tooth relic. The sight calms undisciplined, wayward minds and focuses them on a procession of love and compassion radiating across the universe.
Indeed, these white-clad flag bearers reminds us of the way the Dhamma impacted our lives from the day the tooth relic was brought to the island, and it also reminds us of the way to obtaining release from this life or samsara.
Now we see the provincial flag bearers. The area flag bearers or the provincial flag bearers display the standards of all of the areas that come under the control of the Bhupati or Senkadagalu king.
Indeed, they also signify that the governance of the Kandian kings was well and in accordance with the Dasaraja Dhamma.
In the times of the kings Rajiv, the display of these flags was also a political symbol. The officials of the areas who recognized the sovereignty of the Kandian king brought their flags and standards to display in the procession of the sacred tooth relic.
These provincial flag bearers consists or carries 12 flags. Leading in the forefront is the sun and the moon flag, belonged to the 4 corales. The lion flag belonging to the 7 corales. The flag depicting a swan belonging to Uva. The white flag belonging to Matale. The twin-headed hawk, or known as the Berunda Pakshiya in Sinhala, belongs to the 3 corales. The peacock belongs to Valapane. The lotus flower belongs to the Udapalata. The Gajasingha belongs to Nuwara Kalaviya. The tiger to Wellassa. The parrot to Binthanna. And finally, the bear to Tamankaduwa.
This traditional display of the provincial standards remind us of the glory and sovereignty of the time of the Senkadagalu kings.
And now we witness the brass standard bearers.
The brass Disa flags also represent the glory of Senkadagala. Both gold and brass workers belong to the same clan or Gurukulaya, which is called the Navandanna clan.
Indeed. And this clan used to make beautiful ornaments with detailed engravings and sometimes embedded with precious gems to adorn the sacred tooth relic and the king at the time.
With the durability of the brass flag, the kings of old offered their hope of similar durability and sustainability to the entire nation.
As we witness these metal standard bearers or the brass standard bearers, it gives us a sense of pride to be a part of a nation so rich in culture and immaculate artistry.
Indeed, Rajiv, as you mentioned, the detailed engravings on these flags reflect the artistry levels which prevailed back then.
And in these brass standards again, we witness certain symbols such as lotus flowers, elephants, the Berunda Pakshiya mentioned before.
And now we see the sword carriers.
Those who know the history of the tooth relic would indeed be proud of our history and be proud of the heroes who protected the sacred tooth relic at all times. Since ancient times, the sacred tooth relic has played an important role in local politics, and this is because it was believed that whoever holds the sacred tooth relic holds the governance of the country. And therefore, from the Dalada Perahera to the Kandy or the Senkadagala era, there have been many battles over the sacred tooth relic and has always been protected by the patriotic warriors at the time.
These sword carriers are also from Chandrananda Buddhist College, Kandy.
And interestingly, in ancient times, it was the platoon of sword bearers in the royal army that participated in the procession.
And this is the Peramune leading the procession, ceremoniously carrying the secretarial scroll or the Lekam meteor.
And the elephant or the tusker carrying the Peramune is Kandula, belonged to Venerable Kollupite Mahinda Sangharakkhita Thero of the Kalani Raj Mahavihara.
The duty of the Peramune leading the procession is to inform the citizens of the country that the procession is being carried out in accordance with the directives of the scroll.
And this tusker with beautiful tusks was gifted to Sri Lanka in the year 2001 by a princess of the royal Thai dynasty.
We now see the avant-garde ensemble of drummers, Hey-Visi, advancing. The drummers are representing the traditional orchestra of Sinhala music known as Panchatur Rebhand, the five-fold musical instruments, namely the Daula, the large cylindrical drum, tammattama, the two-faced kettle drum, thalampata, hand cymbals, and horanava, the Sri Lankan horn. Veteran drummers representing the four main lineages Ihalavela, Molagada, Uduvela and Malagammana are leading this proud band of drummers.
And speaking of veteran drummers, the people weaving this procession would in fact learn a lot today, since we have with us here today, live from the Mahamanuwa of the Sri Dalada Maligava, the veteran dancer Kalakirthi Ravibandhu Vidyapati.
It is customary that this avant-garde ensemble of drummers play the valinadas to indicate each turn of the Perahera path.
And now we have the Gajanayak Nilame, Mr. Palita Jayawardena, riding the second tusker. And the Gajanayak Nilame is seen in the procession on the back of a majestic tusker, grasping a gold anchors, which is the emblem of his office. And this tusker is Kote Raja, belonging to Kote Raja Mahaviharaya, Venerable Alutnuvara Anuruddha Thero.
And Kote Raja was gifted to Sri Lanka in the year 2009 from Burma by the former minister Rohita Bogolagama.
The Gajanayak Nilame arrives as the royal official in charge of the king's troop of elephants, and it is a position given to him directly by the king himself in the days of the kings.
Indeed, the post of the Gajanayak Nilame is given on royal decree as he rides ceremoniously, clad in the traditional garb as the Gajaraja.
Coming forth next is Kothala Padaya, that symbolizes the sprinkling of saffron water, a sanitizer to purify the Perahera path. This dance is excerpted from the traditional ritual of Kuhumba Kankari.
This group of dancers has been trained by Nalin Jayasekara.
Dancers making their way, maintaining the traditional Mendiya position of the Kandian dance, which is considered the main stance of the Kandian style. About the Kumbhakarya is the grand ritual that nurtured the Kandian dance.
And these Kotalapade dancers cleansing the way with saffron water paves the way to Banda, belonging to the Honorable Diyavadnilame Pradeep Nilangadala.
And on Banda's mount, we see a Buddhist flag bearer, once again reminding us of the importance of this event as a Buddhist event. Talking about Banda, Banda stands among the 10 tallest domestic elephants in our country.
The Esala Perahera is an annual event that usually attracts many people in large numbers, both from within and outside the island.
And now we have a group of Chamara dancers or fan dancers.
Chamara, the tussle dance, is a popular folk dance that symbolizes fanning gently to blow cool air, providing comforts to the sacred tooth relic.
And as these Gatabera drummers, accompanied by Tammatam, take part in this final Randoli Procession. In the past, it was in fact a regular feature in the royal court. The dancers provide the same comfort and respect to the Dalada sacred tooth relic on this moonlit night.
And it is to be mentioned that this group of dancers who create a serene feeling and also a feeling of great devotion has been trained by Nimesh Sumanaratna.
As we see these chamara fans being fanned to a rhythm, the slight breeze it produces in fact brings a pleasant feeling to those of us who witness this procession.
According to our classical poetry, the large white tussers and majestic elephants are considered auspicious signs. Sala sudu semera sesat gijindu noda vadi. Bala subba lakunu pera manga nakatatat vadi is how it is illustrated in the famed Salalihini Sandesaya.
Again, the true beauty of this dance is witnessed when these dancers perform simultaneously together, making full use of the streets. They dance in a group, moving up and down as if they are fanning the upcoming Perahera casket.
Up next, we have another majestic elephant, the elephant Gajaba from Yakkala, belonging to Mr. Ranjit Vijayasinghe of the Yakkala Moranvatta Devale. And on the mount of Gajaba, we see a canopy symbolizing the protection provided to the upcoming relic casket. And Gajaba is one of the tallest participants of the Dalada Perahera.
And now we witness the first Nayandi troupe taking part in this final Randoli Perahera.
Nayandi is the name of this particular costume, which consists of the lower part of the vest costume, yet omits the elaborate headgear, the crowning piece of the entire outfit, which is replaced here with a simple white turban.
This expression of art and culture is not seen in any corner of the world in this form. It is truly an identity that is owned and so preciously guarded by our own beautiful island nation, Sri Lanka.
a vigorous kastirama, followed by simple walk, and the preceding step with the two pleats held like a fan is a particular step that the Nayandi dancers use and are known as Narumatra. There are traditional families who specialize in this form of Nayandi dance. Narampanawa, Alotuwa, Galdoda are some of the well-known families of the Nayandi dance.
And now we have a duo of elephants with Burmese flags. One elephant is Punchi Banda, belonging to Mr. Kitsiri Mewan Velagedara, and the other elephant is Raja from Hettimulla, belonging to Mrs. Sita Senanayaka Mallava.
Punchi Banda was in fact a continuous participant of the Kandy Esala Perahera since the year 2005. And now we see a group of coconut flower dancers.
Malpadaya, as it is known traditionally, is excerpted and rearranged for the Esala Perahera from the Kumbhakankari ritual. The coconut flower is considered as a symbol of prosperity in our culture.
Indeed, since the Dalada pageant is a great ceremony that brings timely rains and fertility to the land, these dancers, as mentioned, pray for that bounty with these coconut flowers.
This group is led by W.M. Dayananda.
The coconut flower is in fact used in so many auspicious events in upcountry traditions. This signifies prosperity and is used in weddings and in Pirit Mandapa.
It is customary that in our traditional rituals, the coconut flowers and tender coconut leaves are used to decorate the ritual arena.
Now we have the only single tusked elephant taking part in the Dalada Perahera segment. This is the tusker Sindhu, belonging to the Mahanayaka Thero of the Malvatta chapter.
And Sindhu was gifted in the year 2009 by the Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa. And on the Mount of Sindhu, we witnessed a canopy in the shape of a cobra head, yet again depicting and symbolizing the protection given to the Dalada relic.
Now we see a group of Pantheru dancers. Pantheruwa is the circular brass frame instrument with small cymbals fixed onto it to give a subtle metallic trill as it shakes. Pantheruwa was originally used to accompany the chanting of the chamber of versifiers, the Kavikara Maduwa. Since the 18th century, Pantheruwa was used in the development of the semi-classical dance form.
And if you closely pay attention, one can hear the unique chants of the Pantheru dancers carrying the Pantheru in one hand while using the other hand for the dancing movements. I believe these unique chants are from the traditional Pantheru dance rituals known as Suvisi Vivarana and Satsatya.
As you said, the chants associated with the Pantheru dance are from Suvisi Vivarana, describing how the Bodhisattva obtained permission and declaration of the 24 previous Buddhas, and Satsatya, how the Buddha spent 7 weeks after attaining enlightenment, and Pansalis was yet another ritual that contains poetry about the Buddha's services during 45 years.
And this group is led by Sarath Vijayasiri.
The beautiful break in the playing of the drums give the dancer an extra punch.
Up next, we have Kandula Veera belonging to Kaduwela Sankapitti Viharaya, Venerable Kanangama Narada Thero. And Kandula Veera served as a former mascot of the Sri Lanka Army as Kandula IV.
And Kandula was gifted to the Dalada Procession in 2013 by the former minister Vimal Veeravansa.
Now we see a group of Raban Karakavannan. Raban Karakavima, although commonly called Raban dance, this in fact is a sport, Raban Kridava as it is referred to in our traditional literature, which involves skills of spinning and balancing the tambourine on the fingers and on the tips of a long flexible stick.
The clans of the handheld tambourines are exclusively Kandian. The skill of playing, spinning and using the tambourine as an instrument accompanies the invoking of the qualities of Lord Buddha, and these are handed down from father to son, generation to generation.
At the same time, Rajiv, this entire procession involves a lot of symbols. The spinning Rabana can be taken as a symbol for impermanence, as it reminds us that we may lose our life in an instant, in the same way that the Rabana breaks free from the rod or the stick on which it is spinning.
The peak of the entire performance is what we are just about to witness. The little child performer is about to balance a number of rabanas on the sticks held by his mouth, and then two other rabanas by hand. Against the blow of the wind, this is a highly skilled performance.
Indeed, it makes us wonder how such a young dancer with comparatively less experience performs such an act. And these dancers, or these skillful dancers, were trained by Aryapala Vijayamana. This skillful performance reflects the effort and dedication that these dancers make to the Dalada Procession as an offering to the sacred tooth relic.
This elephant who joins the final Randoli Procession now is Madhu, belonging to Mutiyangana Rajamahavihara in Badunga. In fact, to Venerable Murundeniye Dhammaratana Thera. Madhu was gifted by the former Prime Minister Chandrika Kumaratunga in 1999, and he has been participating in the Dalada Perahera since childhood.
And now we witness a troupe of thumb players.
This is the well-known Ridhigama troupe of Thammatam players, and the main dancer and drummer holds the silver kadipu or the playing sticks on his Thammatam, and these silver kadipus were presented to their ancestors by the king.
And this skillful troupe of Thammatam players was trained by Sujit Ananda.
This elephant is Kandulatissa, belonging to Saparagamu Mahasamandevalaya in Ratnapura. This is the elephant who annually carries the godly ornaments of God Saman in the annual Asala festival of the great Ratnapura Samandevalaya. And today on his mount we once again see a canopy bearer who symbolizes protection provided to the sacred relic casket throughout the procession.
And now we see yet another troupe of Pantheru dancers. And these dancers were trained by Palita Hapagoda.
Like in many other traditional art forms, there are the traditional families who have handed down from generation to generation this valuable art of Pantheru dancing. And some of those traditional families are Urapala, Alapalava, Kadigamuwa, Pathahewahata and Veraki.
A special feature of the Pantheru dancers in the entire procession is that they wear the original and traditional attire. In other processions across the island, these Pantheru dancers are attired in costumes styled in various ways.
And once again we have another duo of elephants. In fact, this is Kanchana, belonging to Mahanayakatero of the Sri Lanka Amarapura Nikaya, and Bibila, who belongs to the Mahanayakatero of Sri Lanka Amarapura Nikaya once again.
We now see a group of folk dancers. In fact, this is a dance that combines different types of instruments used in folk dances. We see the atrabana or the hand rabana, the likeli, the chamara and talam, the castanets, all combined to create beautiful choreographies.
These dances that were originated are associated with folk activities and festivities back in the days. The colorfulness, the joyfulness, the diversity of dancing and the patterns, the energy and the speed characterizes these folk dancers.
Along with the drums, we hear the flute accompanying this folk dance. This is also a continuation of a long-standing tradition in Sri Lanka, as the Mahavansa mentions that in the early times of the Dalada Perahera, there were different types of musical instruments such as veena, venu or the flute, along with mridanga, the drums were played along for dances.
And these mixed folk dancers were trained by PCB Vijay Surya.
And now we have a trio of elephants, which is indeed a pleasant sight to see. One is a she-tusker Rani from Pallebadda, and another she-tusker Rani from Velambada, and in the middle we have a very young she-tusker Ganga from Gangaramaya in Hunapitiya.
And on the duo of Ranis, we see Burmese flags being carried, resembling the close connection and the diversity connected to this procession. And now we see yet another Nayandi troupe trained by Saman Nilvita.
The costume of the Nayandi dancers is composite of long draperies, silver and bead ornaments, namely Ulludaya, Nisan Sangala, Devalla, Inahadaya, Aulharaya, Bandivalalu, Urabahu, Kadukan and Jatawa.
The music generated through different instruments and the many songs and verses sung may be quite noisy. However, all these beats, rhythms and melodies are absolutely a unique combination that is very much part of our cultural heritage.
And now we have another duo of she-tuskers in the Dalada Perahera segment. One is Mali belonging to Mr. Chatura Vikramanayaka in Horana, and the other is Kuweni belonging to Mr. Mahinda Milangoda. And these she-tuskers add so much of glamour to the final Randoli procession today.
And we see the Udakki dancers now, a traditional dance using the small hourglass-shaped drum, Udakkiya. The Udakki dance is essentially a form of Buddhist dances originated in the 18th century. We see a special feature of the Udaki dance, making the Udaki Gataya. Dancers making a knot and then accordingly unbounding the knot.
And interestingly, the long string and the tussle which is used to create this knot known as the Udaki Gataya is in fact used to modulate the sound of the drum. This is a great example of the creativity of our ancient artists.
And we also see the master drummers accompanying with chants the Udaki dancers. The Udakia is usually played with fingers, and the skins on either side of the drum is modulated by the cloth tube held in the middle, thus making tonal variations to give a more musical sound.
And this is our fabulous moment in which we see very magnificent trio of tuskers from Sri Dalada Maligav elephant stables, Singha Raja, Buruma Raja and Miyan Raja.
Now we see the first West dance group of the Esala Perahera of the Dalada Perahera. West is the grand classical dance of Sri Lanka. This most glamorous costume symbolically represents the regalia of Kings Malaya, the royal brothers who performed the ancient ritual Hatapas Mangalaya 2500 years ago. And their headgear symbolizing the sun rays. While the circular part of the headgear represents the sun, the upper portion is made in the shape of flames.
And this West dancing troupe was trained by Ishanta Ihilavela and Lasantha Vansekara.
The dancers advancing in slow, profound, serene and pious movements, thus paying respect and offering to the royal tusker that carries the sacred reliquary.
Indeed, this West dance is more than just a ritual. It is in fact a sacred recitation for protection against misfortune. And therefore, the dancer's costume is also considered sacred.
the slow tempo exposition of the Gajaga Vannama that describes the virtues of the celestial elephant Airavana, the vehicle of God Shakra. Although the Kandian dance maintains three regional styles known as Hatskorlea, Hatharkorlea and Mahanuvara, it is interesting to note that all these dancers are adhering to the Mahanuvara Sampradaya or the Kandian, very Kandian tradition.
Dressed in royal white, we witness the Karya Korala, who is the foremost observer of the Dalada Procession. And he is the second in command of the Diyawad Nilame and is a heritage position given by the royal decree.
And now we are about to witness the highlight of the entire procession, the grand Randoli Procession.
Here we see the Nagasinnam player, the long horn, and tamborua, the copper drum. These were musical instruments used in the Nanumura Mangale or the shampooing ceremony of the Dalada Maligava.
We now see the ceremonial tusker Nadungamue Raja, belonging to Dr. Harsha Dharma Vijaya, walking majestically under a grand canopy and on the white cloth carpet. The two tuskers who are accompanying Nadungamur Raja today are Indi Raja from Sri Dalada Maligava and Vasana from Ruhunu Mahakadaragama Devale.
Here we see the Kavikara Madhuva, the chamber of versifiers, was one of the 5 institutes patronized by the king. In the past, they sang panegyries to the king. Today, they sing in serene tone the virtues of the Buddha, to the beat of the silver Udakya and the silver Panterua.
This is the flower lantern grove.
These instruments, the silver Panteru and Udakya, are instruments that have been there since the time of King Kirti Sri Rajasingha.
Following the chamber of versifiers, we now see a group of officials, young officials, carrying flowers and lanterns in veneration of the sacred relic.
Flowers and lanterns are an everyday ritual of Buddhist followers. We pray to Lord Buddha, offering flowers and fire in the form of lanterns.
Now we see the group of West dancers who herald the Devadana Nilame. Although it originated in pre-Buddhist rituals, in fact the Kohomba Kankarya, thriving amongst Buddhist cultural surroundings for centuries, the dance has assumed a mostly Buddhist form lately.
And this second group of West dancers that we see in the Dalada Procession today is led by Ishanta Ihalavela and Lasantha Vansekara.
As these drums beat, the dancers moves their hands, feet and body in perfect harmony with their fellow performers until the crescendo of this performance, which everyone in the audience watching and witnessing this from home and overseas awaits in anticipation.
We now see the Devadana Nilame of Sri Dalada Maligava, Honorable Pradeep Nilangadala, walking up front in the procession, reminding us of the glory of our ancient Kandian kingdom.
And providing protection to the Devadana Nilame, we see the guards lined up alongside the Devadana Nilame.
Talking about the Devadana Nilame, he is appointed by royal decree as the individual tasked with protecting the Dalada with his own life, and also the final responsibility for the whole of this mighty procession rests upon the Devadana Nilame, Honorable Pradeep Nilangadala.
Indeed, witnessing this gives us a very uplifting sight that reminds us of our ancient Kandian glory with the Devada Nilame walking in this state.
The Vidanes of the 10 villages under the Senkadagala king accompany the Devada Nilame as they collectively pay their respect and homage to the Dalada Vahanse.
Indeed, we see them in their official dress and symbolizes the free society of the nation that is under the watchful protection of the king. And now we see the inception of the Natha procession. What you just witnessed were the godly ornaments of God Natha being heralded to be placed on the tusker, which will take the streets following these and many dances and events.
These are the Buddhist flag bearers marking the commencement of the Natha Devala Perahera, which is the first of the 4 Devala Peraheras.
God Natha, worshipped by all Buddhists as Maitri Bodhisattva, the god aspiring the Buddhahood, hence attributed with the serene color yellow.
It could be said that the Natha Devala Perahera is also formed in line with traditional Buddhist worship forms that are more stately and circumspect in their import.
And now we see the first elephant in this Natha Devala procession, which is Rohana, belonged to Mr. Varuna Kannangara of Horana. And the elephants of the Kannangara family, including the Kahatapitiya Tusker, have taken part in this Natha Devala procession and since ancient times in the Natha Devala procession again.
And there's an official on the mount of Rohana symbolizing the beginning of the Natha Devala procession.
And as previously mentioned, given the belief that God Natha is an incarnation of future Bodhisattva Maitri, it is in fact the reason why the Natha Devala procession follows Dalada procession.
Led by the traditional Horana or the horn players, we see the Natha Devala ensemble of drummers advancing in simple steps to the sound of the Gaman He Visi, rhythms compatible with the drummer's walk. The horn players playing the tune of the traditional Gajaka Vannama, as the drummers make steps round them. Making the formation of the digit 8 is a traditional manner of the drummers.
Culture is very much part of the Sri Lankan community, and within this procession exists so much of symbolism and meaning that tells us stories of the essence of our beautiful island and its inhabitants since the ancient days. And here again we see the decorative tussle in the drums that signifies the Grand Masters who hails from long paramparavas.
The art of drumming in Havisi is a highly codified art and practice. Each of these rhythms can be verbally recited, and the recitation goes jing jing jinga 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 jing taka 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 jinga jing jinga 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 jing taka taka taka.
The second elephant we see now is Rohana, is in fact Arjuna from Vaurukannala Rajamahawihare. And on the mount of Arjuna we see the Gajanayaka Nilame of Natha Devale carrying the anchors. And talking about Arjuna, he belongs to Vaurukannala Buduraja Mahavihara, Venerable Karatota Panyasila Thero, and he previously belonged to the late Venerable Likwelle Tissa Nayaka Thero.
We see the Savarang dancers now. Savarang is a popular folk dance with the tussle sticks that make picturesque formations as they make their way through the Perahera path.
The continuous rise and fall of these fans is a gentle and joyful sight to the people who are triggered towards wholesome and devotional thoughts. And this energetic Savaran dancing troupe was trained by Dilshan Shalika from the Arya Rangayatana.
These young dancers seem to celebrate the glory of the grand pageant in energetic movements as they advance through to the accompaniment of the Gatabere, Daula and Tammatam.
Clad in gleaming yellow with the symbol of or the vehicle of God Natha, we now see Vijita Raja belonging to Dimulagala Aranya Senasana in Polonnaru.
And now we see the first Pantheru dancing troupe in the Natha Devala procession. And this troupe was trained by Nimesh Nivantaka from the Nimesh Rangayatana in Colombo.
Typical Panteru walk to the profound rhythm of the Gataberea, leading to an Alankara Matre or a variation. Panteru is perhaps the only form of Kandian dance that enjoys freedom to perform acrobatics.
And this is a very beautiful moment in which a mother and her son join the Dalada Procession. This is Kumari and Bandara belonging to Mr. Kamal Kitsiri of Kottava.
And this is yet another Tammatam troupe making their way with the unique sound to the Esala Procession.
Known as the Pokuru Beraya, Tammatama is one of the main instruments of the Panchaturian Adaya. It is known as Pokuru Beraya because it is bound together with two kettle drums bound together, making two different sounds, the bass and the high sounds.
And this is Lasanda, clad in yellow. Lasanda belongs to Devinura Upulvan Vishnu Devale. And we now have the first troop of West dancers in the Dalada Devale procession.
The most unique and most recognized of the Kandian dance heritage, the fully adorned Vesnatua, is symbolic of the highest epitome of a dancer in their Udarata dancing career.
It was mentioned earlier that the costume of the Kandian dancer is sacred. Indeed, it is sacred because in our traditional literature or the poetry sung in the Kohumba Kankarya, there is mention of gods and deities pertaining to each part of the costume from head to toe.
Indeed, and these costumes were not stored just anywhere. They were usually placed in a separate shrine room or at the village temple.
Yes, Raji. I think we are about to witness the most awaited moment in the Dalada Perahera procession. And we now see the Tusker Muthuraja carrying the godly ornaments of God Natha, and the two elephants who accompany, in fact the two she-tuskers accompanying Muthuraja today are Kumari and Rani. Muthuraja and Kumari belong to Aludgama Kandy Vihare and Rani belongs to Mr. Nalaka Jayasingha.
The second group of West dancers of the Dalada Perahera heralding the Basnayaka Nilame. The attire of the Kandian dancer is also considered the complete attire of god Kohumba, as the story goes that when the three Malaya kings performed the ritual, it was their wish for it to be continued in Sri Lanka. Therefore, they entrusted the continuation to a young prince, Kohumba, and since then known as Kohumba Deviyu, who is propitiated in the Kohumba Kankarya. Hence the costume is also attributed to god Kohumba. Advancing slowly to the tune of the Gajagawannama and the rhythm of the Gajagawannama beat.
And this West dancing troupe was trained by Asanka Karunaratna from Gelioya.
We now see the Basnaik Nilame of Sri Mahanatha Devalaya in Kandy, Mr. Gayan Hashilahin Kenda, accompanied by the two Basnaik Nilames of Pittisara Devalayas, Mr. Anura Iriyakama from Vegiriya Srinatha Devalaya and Mr. Akalanka Bandara, the Basnaik Nilame of Srinatha Devalaya in Dodamwala.
And on either side of the Basnaik Nilames, we see a resemblance of the sun and gods, symbolizing the protection given to these officials. Marking the end of the Natha Devala procession, we see the inception of the Vishnu Devala procession. What you just witnessed were the godly ornaments of God Vishnu being brought to be placed on the Tusker who will take the streets today.
Buddhism has accommodated gods and deities from other faiths, especially Hinduism. Hence, Vishnu is considered as a Buddhist god. He is also known as Upulvan, the god of blue lotus, and we Buddhists believe that he is the custodian of Sri Lanka.
Indeed, this procession, the Vishnu Devala procession, takes a turn when it comes to the culture it portrays. Even the flags carried are different to the previously witnessed Buddhist flags, where these flags bear a variety of symbols representing certain zonal and provincial areas.
And on these flags we can also see the vehicle of God Vishnu, which is a mythical bird called Gurula. And when it comes to this segment, we can see the participants, elephants and performers, all clad in blue, once again symbolizing the color of God Vishnu. And we now see the first elephant in the Vishnu Devala Perahera segment. This is the elephant Suranimala, belonging to Alutnuvara Dadimunda Devale. Suranimala was gifted from the Pinnavala Elephant Orphanage in 2017 by the Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa.
Accompanied by the Horanava and the Talampata, we see the Vishnu Devala Hevisi group advancing in a traditional Gaman Hevisi rhythm. The conch shell being a sign of prosperity. leads the Hevisi troop.
And this Hevisi troop, performing in perfect unison, was trained by Saman Priyanka from Arabegedara. And they belong to the Sabaragamuwa Alutnuwara Hevisi Paramparawa.
We see the leading panikyas or the veteran leading performers of the different paramparas or the lineages leading this group of drummers adorned with the tasseled daulas. The repertoire of Hevisi drumming is such a wide one that each of these groups of drummers play a different rhythm from one another.
Indeed, we see players playing the daula and the epitome, incorporating these to create a very unique sound.
And this is the Gajanayaka Nilame of Vishnu Devale riding the second elephant, Haritha. Haritha belongs to Mr. Tusita Ranavaka, and he's also an elephant gifted from the Pinnavala Elephant Orphanage in 2011 by the Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksha. And on Haritha's robes we can see the symbol of God Vishnu Gurula.
Clad in glittery blue costumes, we see the Likali dance troupe advancing. Likali is yet another popular folk dance common to all regions of Sri Lanka, but with the accompaniment of the Gataberea, Daula and Kammatama. This represents the upcountry variety of the Likali dance.
A common feature that can be seen throughout the Devala processions is the symbolism and the use of color. And in this procession, in this Vishnu Devala procession, we see the use of blue, which, as mentioned before, resembles the color or the complexion of God Vishnu.
Joining the procession now is Muthu, belonging to Muthiyangana Rajamahaviharya in Badulla, and Muthu belongs to Venerable Murundeniye Dhammaratana Thero. On Muthu's mount we see an official carrying a standard.
And again, clad in varied and different costumes, we see a Savaran dancing troupe. And this troupe was trained by Ruwan Talgahagoda. Another feature of these Devala processions is the use of vibrant colors, and one could also notice the gradual increase in energy and pace in these performances. You see these young dancers make use of the complete space in the streets with graceful movements using their savarang. The simplicity of these steps allows even the very young children to experience the honor of being a part of such an amazing procession, witnessed by the whole of Sri Lanka and internationally as well. And we should be very thankful of the participation of these young souls despite the pandemic.
And it is truly something remarkable to see elephants from the Pinnavala orphanage join the Esala procession. We now have one such elephant, the elephant Gamanu Kandula, and also the elephant Galkulama, belonging to Mr. Mahinda Millangod of Kegol.
And yet another beautiful performance of Gatabera drummers. Apologies. Udakki.
Udakki drummers accompanied by the Gatabera. It is usual that the Udakki dancers accompany themselves on the Udakki itself while singing the accompanying songs. But here, to give more power and energy to the dance, these dancers use Gatabera.
Even though the dance of the Udakki players seems to be relatively simple, they perform an act of multitasking.
Indeed, dancing, playing the drum and singing along with that is no easy task. It needs long years of training.
And this quite challenging dance was trained by Kondadeniye Samansiri.
This is the future of the Esala procession. We now see very young tuskers, Mihin Raja belonging to Mr. M.K. Vanyarachi of Veerakatia and Rohana Raja once again belonging to the same owner, Mr. M.K. Vanyarachi of Veerakatia.
And here too we witness the immaculate artistry and the creativity of Sri Lankan artists. The drapes of these elephants are embedded with different patterns.
We see the Panteru dancers encircling the main dancers to perform their acrobatic movements.
And this group was trained by K.G. Dhammasiri from the Kodituaku Paramparava.
The instrument Panterua is also connected to God Vishnu. It is mentioned that the Panterua derives from the Chakrayuda, one of the weapons of God Vishnu.
In addition to that, it is also believed that the Panteru dance was performed at the ancient times to celebrate the victories of the kings in the battlefield.
And we now see the first trio of elephants in the Vishnu Dalada Perahera segment. These elephants are Pillumale from the Pinnavala Elephant Orphanage and Sanju belonging to Mr. Jagat Vitana of Matugama and Pooja belonging to Mrs. Kamini Samarasinghe of Ramdini.
Throughout this procession, we hear the dancers, and at this instance, the Panteru dancers chant unique virtues and songs. The backflips, acrobatics and leaps are indeed spellbinding. And the twirl on one foot that we just saw is in fact the highlight of this performance. Now we see these trio of elephants take the streets, carrying two snake-shaped Canopies, again symbolizing the protection given to this procession, the godly ornaments of God Vishnu. And now we see yet another ensemble of Nayandi dancers accompanied by two lines of Gatabere drummers.
The dancers going into what is known as Teimatra, gradually increasing their speed. The dancers are about to perform an Narumatra. The Gatabere players are leading into variations based on the four basic mnemonics known as Tat, Jit, Ton, Nam. The Nayandi costume is also the costume of the amateur Kandian dancers. Before wearing the full vest costume. The donning of the vestatua or the elaborate headgear demands long years of training and a grand ceremony known as Vesmangalya.
We now have a trio of elephants, in fact one elephant accompanied by two she-tuskers. The elephant is Tikiri belonging to Mr. Jagat Vitana of Matugama, and the two she-tuskers are None belonging to Mr. Sarat Jayalat of Maspota and Mutu belonging to Mr. Indika Mudunkot of Manikina. On the mount of these three elephants, we see officials once again wearing canopies and also cobra head-shaped canopies.
The West dancers making their way through in simple steps the Gaman Matra. It is customary that the dancers make use of the Gaman Matra to take a break after performing hard and vigorous steps.
There is something insanely thrilling in the movements of these West dancers. The bracelets on their feet, the quivering ornaments on their headdresses create the most rhythmic tinkling sound, accompanied by these Gatavira drummers.
Dancers now perform the typical Gaman Matra, or the walk of the Kandian dance, leading into a simple Tei Matra. After the fast and vigorous Kastirama, the dancers fall back to the advancing movement of Gaman Matra.
And now we see the chief incumbent of the Sri Mahavishnu Devalaya in Kandy walking before the main Tusker group. It is believed that God Vishnu is the god overseeing the well-being of the island nation Sri Lanka, and we now see the Tusker Rama belonging to Mr. Tudor Gunasekara of Heyantuduwa carrying the godly ornaments of such a god. And today Rama is accompanied by Sita belonging to Mrs. Nilanthi Veerasinghe of Mirigama and Vasana belonging to Mrs. Krishanti Alapata of Ratnapura.
In this beautiful moonlit night, along with the moon rays that are reflected on the streets of the Kandian kingdom, we see the shimmer of brilliant blue. And this is the symbolic color of God Vishnu.
And it is also to be noted, Rajiv, that Rama, who is a single tusked tusker, has been assigned with this task of carrying the godly ornaments of God Vishnu for a very long time.
We now see the second group of West dancers who herald the Basnayaka Nilame of the Vishnu Esala Perahera.
The complex dancing patterns and steps performed by these dancers cannot be practiced overnight. It comes with a lot of talent and experience that they inculcate in themselves by being a part of this very Kandy Esala Perahera.
Indeed, it needs long years of rigorous training under great gurus to achieve this standard of dancing. It is also interesting to note that once adorned in this regalia of the Malaya kings or the Kohamba god, the dancers seem to be having a highly dignified appearance. And in the movements, they maintain the dignity of the performance as well as the greatness and sacredness of their costume.
With their dignified dance form, they are now welcoming the Basnaik Nilames of the Pitisara Devales, who represent the Basnaik Nilame of Sri Mahavishnu Devale in Kandy today. And these Basnaik Nilames are Mr. Priyantha Amanugama from Lankatilaka Vishnu Devale, Mr. Abhita Ratnayaka from Hangurankita Vishnu Devale, Mr. Bradley Amanugama from Gadaladeniya Vishnu Devale, Mr. S.K. Ratnayaka from Morape Kataragama Devale, Mr. Sivali Nugegoda from Vallahagoda Kataragama Devale, and finally Mr. Jayampati Heenkenda from Alavatugoda Saman Devale.
We see the officials take prideful steps as they mark the end of the Vishnu Devala procession. And again we see these officials being surrounded by guards, signifying the protection given to them. Marking the end of the Vishnu Devala procession, we now see pictures from the Kataragama Devalaya. What you just witnessed was the Iyer of the Kataragama Devalaya, heralding the goldy ornaments to be placed on the tusker who will take the streets on this 5th Randoli Perahera.
Marking the beginning of the Kataragama Devale procession, we now see a group of flag bearers, in fact a group of Buddhist flag bearers. Talking about the Kataragama Devale and God Kataragama, the Devale was dedicated to God Skanda Kumara or God Kataragama, and that makes this procession too, this segment of the entire procession too, a dedication, a devotion which is done for God Kataragama. It is believed that God Kataragama has 6 faces and 12 hands. The color worn by most of the participants in this segment is red, and that is believed to be the color associated with God Kataragama.
According to Hinduism, God Kataragama is the god of war, hence the color of red. But our ancient Literal sources reveal that the Buddha entrusted God Kataragama the task of protecting Buddhism in Sri Lanka.
And here we see, following the Buddhist flag bearers, a group of cloth flag bearers. And in their cloth flags, we see a resemblance of the peacock, which is believed to be the godly vehicle of God Kataragama.
In the iconographies of the traditional Hindu and Buddhist gods, each god is attributed with weapons and a vehicle.
And here we see various depictions of the peacock, again reflecting the artistry and the creativity of our ancient heritage. And these cloth flag bearers were led by Dilan Chaturanga Ratnayaka.
Coming into our sight now are the heavy sea beaters of the Kataragama Devale.
Led by the veterans of the respected traditional families, the drummers of the Kataragama Esala Perahera advance in what is known as Tung Adiya of the Kandian dance.
This is the first elephant in the Kataragama Esala Perahera segment. In fact, this is a she-tusker who is called Manike, belonging to Mr. Anurag Kempitiya of Kyulpane in Kegod. And on Manike's mount, we see the Gajanayaka Nilame of Kataragama Esala riding.
And of course, this elephant again, adorned in brilliant red, is symbolic of the color dedicated to God Kataragama. And now we see a group of young castanet players.
Clad in a beautiful combination of beige and red, the young dancers beat the castanets to the rhythm of the Tammatama and Daula.
The Thalam dance is a common form of dance around Sri Lanka. And what you witness now is the Kandian form of the Thalam dance, which is accompanied by Daula and Tammatam players. As we've witnessed throughout this procession, the Daula, the Gatadere and the Tammatam are instruments that have supported and allowed these dancers to perform their dancing act.
This is Khadira, belonging to Vipashyarama temple in Maharagama. And when it comes to the name of this elephant, it is quite symbolic because Khadira is a name used to call god Skandakumara or god Kataragama, and it is quite coincidental that Khadira joins the Kataragama Dalada Perahera itself.
A young group of Likeli dancers advancing.
These dancers gives us a sense of respect and pride for the Angampura martial artists for protecting our island nation from invaders.
In fact, the Likeli dance also symbolized the combats between the sword fighters, the great warriors of our proud past.
This is the elephant Ratna belonging to Palmadulla Rajamaha Viharaya, in fact to Venerable Bengamue Dhammadinna Thero.
And we see yet another group of Udaki players with a silver colored string and a tassel attached to it, different to the Udaki instruments we witnessed before, which had a red string attached to it.
According to our poetry and literature associated with the dance, the Udakya is commonly associated, most of the time associated, with the stories of the Buddha. The Udaki dancers usually perform or sing poems from the Dalada Sirita. Here we see the proper Udaki dance without the accompaniment of any other drum. The dancers dance, play and sing, all synchronized together.
And I believe the representation of the Udaki as a dance is very unique to the Udarata culture.
This is Sama, belonging to Alan Mathinia Rama temple in Kirulapani. And now we are about to see a very fabulous dance form which is quite relevant to the Kataragama Devala procession, the peacock dance.
Indeed, this section of the Kataragama Devala procession, in fact, this section in the entire procession takes a turn. It turns somewhat away from the traditional dance forms we witnessed and the culture, the traditional culture portrayed throughout this procession.
Majura or Myra, or the peafowl, is the vehicle of god Kataragama according to traditional iconography and literature. And this is a folk dance found both in Sri Lanka and South India.
The characteristics and the appearance of the peacock is not only portrayed through these vibrant costumes with feathers of peacocks attached to it, but the characteristics of the godly vehicle of god Kataragama is also depicted by these dance moves.
And it is to be mentioned that this beautiful dance is brought to you by Mrs. Vinita Jayaratna of Sri Ranamayura Kalayatanaya in Galevilla.
As you can see, the motions depicted is very characteristic of the peacock seen in nature. This again resembles the symbolism and the close connection of all these dance acts to nature.
At the same time, Rajiv, I think we should mention the use of different instruments in the Kataragama Devala Perahera segment.
Indeed, the music ensemble of this dance consists of a variety of instruments: the Indian towel drum, the horn nadaswaram together with western trumpet, snare drum and side drums.
As another beautifully dressed elephant leaves our sight, we once again sees another form of the same dance, the peacock dance, and this group has been trained by another guru called Tilakasiri Usgoda Arachi from Muthuhara Kalayatanaya.
Here we clearly see at the right end of the picture the tawil drum, one of the traditional temple drums associated with Hinduism.
Bearing a cobra head-shaped canopy, we have Chula belonging to Palmadulla Rajamaha Viharaya, Venerable Bengamue Dhammadinna Theru.
What comes to our sight now is the interesting Kavadi dance, a traditional devotional dance performed as an offering to God Kataragama. The Tamil name Kavadi means burden. The decorative object the dancers carry on their shoulders is the symbolic representation of the feet of God Kataragama.
Indeed, it consists and is decorated with flowers and peacock feathers, and the structure of it is made out of wood or steel. The devotees of God Kataragama would carry it during auspicious times and festivities on their shoulders as a part of showing their sincere devotion to God Kataragama.
I think it is quite essential to talk about the instruments as well as the weapons they carry in this segment.
Exactly. The dancers also bear the Velayuda and Trishula, the weapons attributed to God Kataragama and Shiva.
And although this Kavadi dance does not have the controlled steps that the more traditional upcountry dance forms have, these effortless dancers perform these acts as an offering and veneration to God Kataragama.
This is the elephant Panduka joining the Kataragama Devala procession, who belongs to Piliyandala Ganevatta Kataragama Devale under the responsibility of Mr. Chandana Katriyarachi.
Group of West dancers falling into performing a Teimatra.
And as mentioned before, this dancing technique, partly derived from South India, focuses on dynamism, powerful footwork, which is integrated with different forms of leaps and whirls, bringing the energy and the beauty, painting a beautiful picture.
is true that we have certain South Indian elements in our culture, but thriving through a Buddhist culture for many centuries, all our dance forms have assumed an essentially and unique Sri Lankan form. Here comes the Tawil and Nadaswaram troupe, associated with all Hindu temples of India and Sri Lanka. The Nadaswaram, the horn, is known as Mangala Vadya, the auspicious instruments, together with the the tawil. Some scholars say that the term daula is also a distortion of the name tawil.
And we now witness the Iyer of the Kataragama Devalaya take the streets, leading the way to the godly ornaments of God Kataragama.
The elephant who carries the godly ornaments of God Kataragama today is Esala, belonging to Senanayaka Mudalinda Ramapirivena in Pirisyala, and the two elephants who accompany Esala are Aruna from Handala and Sankaraja from Ambilipitiya.
And following the trio of elephants bearing the godly ornaments of God Kataragama is the second West dancing troupe of the Kataragama Dalada Procession.
The elaborate headgear of the Kandian dancer consists of 5 main components: the jatava, the pahimpata, the sikhabandhana, todupat, and the long tail ekavala. In fact, the innermost part, which is worn, called the jatava, bears the shape of a dagaba. Hence, the costume in its entirety is considered sacred.
We can say that this costume itself transforms these dancers into the children of the sun.
The headgear represents sun god with its front piece, the circular front piece known as the sikhabandhana, and the upper portion in the shape of flames.
Representing the Basnayak Nilame of Sri Maha Kataragama Devalaya in Kandy, we have 2 Basnayak Nilames of the Pittisara Devalayas. And the Basnayak Nilames of the Pittisara Devalayas are Mr. Ryan Valisundara and Mr. T.B. Valisundara, and today they are representing the Basnayak Nilame of Kataragama Devalaya in Kandy.
Under the protection and under the shadows of the Mutkuda, surrounded by guards, we see the representations of the Basnayak Nilames pave the way to the Pattani Devala procession. amidst the tunes of the Daula and the Tammattama, what we just witnessed was the godly ornaments being heralded to be taken to the Tusker, which were blessed by the Alati Amma, and leading the Pattini Devala procession, we now see a troop of Buddhist flag bearers, which is quite a common sight we saw throughout the Devala processions.
Talking about Goddess Pattini, she is a deity who commands great respect among most of the citizenry of the country. Folklore stated that the Goddess Pattini was a great model who preserved her chastity, and due to this great and noble quality, she could obtain the highest veneration of human beings.
Being revered as the goddess of chastity, the cult of Pattini was brought to Sri Lanka in the 12th century during the reign of King Gajaba. Now we see the heresy troop of the Kataragama, Pattini Devala advancing. Ever since the sacred Bodhi sapling was brought to Lanka by Theri Sangamitta, paying homage to the Buddha, the gods and the sacred objects associated with the Buddha has been a strong tradition. Likewise, paying tribute to the guardian gods also has been such an unbroken tradition in Sri Lanka. Along with Theri Sangamitta, there came groups of service guilds that arrived to do services to the Bodhi sapling, and among them there were the musicians and drummers. Since then, playing drum offering has been an unbroken tradition in Sri Lanka. It is that age-old tradition that these drummers represent today.
When it comes to the Pattini Devala procession, we can see the participants will be wearing the color yellow, and this is the first elephant joining the procession with the Devale's Gajanayaka Nilame, and this elephant is Bandara belonging to Mr. Kitsiri Kahatapitiya in Horana.
And now marking the significance and the uniqueness of the Pattini Devala procession, we see the female counterpart of the Panteru dance.
Pattini Devala Perahera is the only segment where female participation is found in this whole pageant. The Panteru is also connected with Goddess Pattini. It is believed that the instrument is deriving from the sacred anklet of Goddess Pattini.
And this elephant, who now joins the Pattini Devala procession, is Sita belonging to Mr. Roshan Patirana of Maharagama.
Here we see a folk dance with a combination of different instruments used in agrarian activities. The sickle, the winnowing fan, the pot, and also a bunch of paddy that symbolizes prosperity and fertility.
Indeed, representing the great agrarian society of Sri Lanka, harvesting paddy is considered an auspicious task, and as rightly mentioned, it also marks prosperity. Harvesting paddy and bundling them and taking them to the kamatha, or the husking compound, calls for celebrations. And this dance dates back to centuries.
Following the dancers, we now have the elephant Raja belonging to Mr. Asanka Vijayasinghe of Balangoda. And if you observe carefully, you can see an official bearing a canopy, once again symbolizing the shelter and protection provided to the sacred godly ornaments of Goddess Pattini.
And here we see an ensemble of Paturu dancers, a very unique dancing act that we did not witness before in this procession.
Patru, or the splinter dance. In fact, a not too old folk dance tradition, yet a very popular one nowadays.
And here again we see the colorfulness, the joyfulness, the energy, and the gradual increase in speed, which is very characteristic of folk dancers.
This elephant is namely Tarindu, and Tarindu belongs to Kirivehera Rajamaha Viharaya of Kataragama, Venerable Kobavaka Damminda Theru. And now we have a group of young female dancers who are performing the Chamara dance.
Chamara is in fact an instrument used to show respect. And here, the chamara are used to pay homage and respect to the godly ornaments of Goddess Pattini. And it is done so since Goddess Pattini is believed to be a goddess of great virtues and is worthy of such veneration.
With a canopy and a cobra head-shaped canopy on the mount, we now have Kumari joining the Pattini Esala procession. Kumari belongs to Mr. Asanka Vijayasinghe of Balangoda.
Magnifying the beauty of the Pattini Esala procession, we now see the female counterpart of the West dancing tradition, with females adorned in vibrant colored attire and head accessories.
This tradition of dance began in the 1940s when the Kandian dance was introduced to school curriculum by Mr. SLB Kapkotua. Today, classical dance as performed by females has become a unique tradition in the traditional spaces like the Perahera as well as the modern stage.
And we now have another elephant, and this is in fact Manike belonging to Mrs. Shriyani Gunawardhana of Dannovita. And Manike is also clad in yellow symbolizing the color of goddess Pattini.
And now, following the female counterpart of the West dancing tradition, we see the more common version of the West dancing troupe, which is more commonly known, the well-known West dancing troupe.
And in contrast to the female dancing, the West dancers represent the masculine form known as the Tandava, whereas the female dancers perform the Lasya aspect of the Kandian dance.
These dancers take on the streets with such beauty and grace, paying no heed to their souls. They are indeed very proud to be part of the honor by performing for the procession, honoring the godly ornaments of Goddess Pattini, which they welcome as we speak.
Paving the way for the main elephant group in the Pattini Esala procession, we now have the chief incumbent of Sri Mahapattini Esala in Kandy. Today, the elephant who carries the godly ornaments of Goddess Pattini is Mangala, belonging to Most Venerable Mahanayaka Thero of Sri Lanka Ramanya Nikaya, and the two elephants who accompany Mangala today are Manike, who belongs to Mr. H.U. Nishanka of Kego, and Rani, who belongs to Mr. Richard Gonakumbura of Balangoda.
We see the second group of West dancers in the Pattini Esala Perahera. As the Kandian dance derives from the Komba Kankarya ritual, the task of the dancer in the ritual or the Kankarya is to act as a medium between the humans and the unknown. That is, assuming the role of a dancer priest. But in contrast to that, in the Perahera, he assumes the role of a welcomer, giving grand welcome to the elephants carrying the caskets.
The second troupe of West dancers in the Pattini Esala Perahera segment is leading the way for the representative of the Basnayaka Nilame of Sri Mahapattini Esala in Kandy, and this is Mr. A.W.S. Bandaranayaka, the Basnayaka Nilame of Pitisara Esala. In fact, the Esala of Ambakka Sri Kataragama Esala, representing the Basnayaka Nilame of the Pattini Esala today. And this is the most important segment in the Randoli Procession. the palanquins from the shrines to the four attendant deities, God Natha, God Vishnu, God Katharagama and Goddess Pattini are being carried at the end of the grand Randoli Procession.
And what you just saw was the conclusion of the final Randoli Perahera.
We are grateful for the help and commitment of both state and non-state supporters who work tirelessly to make this event successful.
Let there be timely rains that will bring life-giving water to our fields and ensure a bountiful harvest.
May our country prosper.
Dalada Summit.